Hello, scholars. I would like to do this short video just so I can go over some of the information that we would have discussed in class that we've not been able to actually review in class. But I think it's very important for you guys to know and be exposed to so that you can at least have a good opportunity of, doing well on your quizzes moving forward. And also, I just feel like this information is beneficial in general. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen so that we can go through some of these slides. All right, so the book that we're using is the 6th edition of BB and BB's Public Speaking Handbook. And in chapter 1, we talk about communication, not just communication in general, but public speaking and the differences between public speaking and conversation. We also give a brief history of communication, and we talk about what's called the communication model. So basically, the learning objectives are to compare and contrast public speaking and conversation, also to explain the importance of public speaking or the study of public speaking, and to look at the illustration of the model of communication and discuss a brief history of public speaking. So, public speaking in regards to the difference between conversation, typically when we are discussing conversation, we're referring to what's known as interpersonal communication. And interpersonal communication is a relational exchange between two or more individuals. So, if you had to type up a definition of interpersonal communication, it would be using messages to generate meaning via a relational exchange. And basically, what a relational exchange is a conversation between two individuals who happen to be in some form of relationship. Now, I'm not talking about an intimate relationship. Bear in mind that there are completely platonic relationships. Additionally, we enter into relationships with people on a daily basis. I say this because essentially a relationship is just an interaction where there's a certain level of interdependence. Now, interdependence is mutual need, the idea that I need you for something, or at least I perceive that I need you for something, and you perceive that you need me for something. So even when we decide that we're going to take an Uber ride or a Lyft ride, if you prefer Lyft over Uber, when we decide that we are going to trust this Uber driver to get us safely to our destination, and of course we do need that person to get us safely to our destination, and they need us to pay them, that means that we have a relationship. And the level of communication, the breadth and or depth of interaction within communication is going to be contingent on our perception of their relationship. So that spans far beyond that short-lived communication between the Uber driver and yourself to the relationship that you may have with the physician, where there may be great depth of information shared in terms of your medical condition, medical history, and all of that, but not so much breadth, and your intimate relationships that you may have with friends, family, and significant others, whereas you'll talk in great detail about a variety of subjects. This is completely different from the idea that we consider when we're talking about public speaking. When we talk about public speaking, we're talking about the idea that I have a message that I believe is necessary to share with an audience. Their perception might not be one that the audience members have. Additionally, this interaction is going to be far more formal. We're going to be prepared to present this message. There are clearly defined roles. I am the facilitator. These people are just hopefully receiving the message that I am sending. So those are a few differences between what we typically look at as conversation versus public speaking. Now, when we talk about why public speaking is important, or rather the study of public speaking is important, we're talking about the difference between being empowered, feeling that we are comfortable and confident when we present our messages, when we present ourselves, and those who are less confident and less comfortable. So the idea of taking a public speaking class, or maybe even an interpersonal class or a speech arts class or conflict resolution class, any of those courses, is so that we will feel more comfortable presenting our thoughts and our ideas and our feelings, because we've had experience, we've learned concepts, we've learned theories that would help strengthen our ability to present ourselves in a way that is effective, for one, as well as in a way that increases our credibility, because whenever you do something correctly, properly, then people are more likely to accept whatever message you present to them, because they feel confident that what you're bringing to the table is truth and that it's centered in some degree of authority that you have because you're comfortable with that information. This translates directly to employment, because if you were to research what employers typically look for from employees, oftentimes they will note that they look for people who are able to clearly articulate their thoughts and feelings, both in written and in spoken word. Both of these are verbal communication. So when we talk about verbal communication, we're talking about the use of words, written and spoken, presentation of words. And employers want that. When you go to an interview, they expect you to be able to clearly articulate what you are bringing to the table, what you can contribute to their organization. Those are two reasons that communication, or the study of communication, and hopefully the increase in communication competence, the increase of communication competence is something that justifies why we might study public speaking or communication. So communication is an action, it is a process, and it involves various processes, various stages that we might want to talk about when we are considering what this is and how we can best maneuver this process. So when we look at the communication model, we see a source or a sender of a message, and the sender of that message does what's called encoding. And encoding is the process of developing a message. And the message is thereafter sent via a channel. And essentially, a channel is the means by which a message is sent. This message is thought of or interpreted by a receiver, and that process is known as decoding. And all of this goes on within a particular context with the potential of noise. And noise is anything that inhibits the effective transmission of a message. So some people have thought of this process as circular because of the fact that while the encoder or the sender of the message is preparing their message and they're sending this message, the decoder is also thinking about what they might consider an effective or appropriate message to return. So in the process of me decoding your message, I am also encoding a message to send back to you in the form of feedback. And feedback is a response to any received message. So all of this is going on at the same time. So there's somewhat of a circular process taking place when we communicate, as noted by this model. So when we talk about communication as a transaction, it's basically saying that all of these things are going on simultaneously, that as I am encoding, you are decoding. Even in the beginning, when the sender begins to encode their initial message, they're probably sending messages already with facial expressions, their posture, their movement. All of those things can be interpreted as a message, can generate some form of meaning. So the entire time, I'm sending, I'm receiving. This is a transactional process. Okay, I want to go back because I want to break down noise. So noise can be anything that inhibits the effective transmission of a message. There are various types of noise. Anything that is external to the sender and or receiver is considered what we call physical noise. That can be a foul smell. If that distracts you during the communication process, that could be considered physical noise. Sirens, loud noises, loud music, someone using a jackhammer, that could be considered physical noise. Even a bright light, something that creates a glare or impairs your vision so that you can't see written messages, would be also considered physical noise. Physiological noise is any physical condition of the sender and or receiver that inhibits effective transmission of a message. So if I were deaf and you tried to speak to me, I wouldn't be able to effectively receive that message, so that would be physiological noise. A less serious example might be a migraine. Let's say that I have a really horrible headache, and we all know that migraines come with sensitivity to light and sound. If the light and sound causes me to be distressed to the point where I can't positively accept the message that you share with me, then that might be considered physiological noise. Psychological noise is based on attitudes, beliefs, and feelings. So any type of preconceived notion that I may have on about you, any type of prejudice that I may have against you, let's say I'm racist or sexist or ageist, any of those things they would fall under the category of what's called ethnocentrism, which is the belief that my culture is superior to yours. But all of those things, anything that could get in the way of me thinking about your message in a right frame of mind with an unbiased mentality, that will be considered psychological noise. The last type is semantic noise. That's semantic. Semantic noise is noise caused by a language barrier. So if someone uses foreign language that you're not familiar with, that's a language barrier. If someone uses jargon, which is technical language used for professions and hobbies, such as medical terminology and legal terminology, if they use those words and you're not familiar with them, that can cause a communication barrier known as semantic noise. Also, when we go to different parts of the world, or maybe even nationally, here in the United States, domestically, here in the United States, if we go to the South, but we're originally from the North, and they use terminology, slang that we're not familiar with, that could be semantic noise also. So let's go. All right, so rhetoric. One of my favorite philosophers, Aristotle, discussed in great detail rhetoric. He wrote a book that was focused on Nicomachean ethics, and he talked about the three means of persuasion that you may recall from your persuasive section in English in high school: logos, pathos, and ethos. Far before Aristotle, there were individuals known as sophists. Some people call them sophists. And these individuals were experts in the art of rhetoric. They traveled the world, sharing their thoughts and their opinions, typically based on the education that they received. During that time, a lot of people were not afforded the opportunity to receive a formal education, and those who were considered sophists, and they were considered experts. So they did public speaking a lot. They went around and they spread information. They taught individuals about the best practices for raising their children, best practices for agriculture and business, so on and so forth, those things that can positively contribute to society. And so you may read about that in the text and have a better understanding about what the history of oration looks like. When we talk about Roman orators and we talk about the ancient city-states and Athens and all of that, we're talking about those individuals who needed positive, credible oration for the sake of getting laws passed. We talk about the original democracy, for the sake of creating and building a positive and growing society. Oration was necessary, was vital, and it was an art form that was considered to be amazing, to be something that should be celebrated. And very few people had this gift, and those who did have this gift were celebrated. All right, so one of these terms that I think is necessary for you to be familiar with is declamation. Declamation is presentation of a speech that's already famous, like if someone were to recite the I Have a Dream speech, or the Gettysburg Address, or anything like that, that would be considered declamation. Elocution is the process of presenting a message in a way that not only shares the words, but also shares the sentiment. When you use your entire person, your entire body to present a message rather than just reading a speech, when you use your nonverbals and your tone and your pitch and your rate to make your speech dramatic and attention grabbing, that is what we're talking about when we talk about elocution. All right, so I'll touch on this a little bit for my mass comm people. When we talk about the growing of communication and our ability to get messages to a large audience, we're talking about predominantly mass communication. And mass communication is basically using messages to generate meaning via a mediated system. And these mediated systems allow us the potential to get our messages to large audiences such as television, film, radio. Now, when this became something that we could actually use to get our messages across, the importance of being credible and being mindful of what we said using these tools grew exponentially. The idea that I could be recorded and that recording could go and be spread to millions of individuals was an idea that led individuals to develop strong standards. Now, later, maybe next week, we'll talk about communication ethics, but I do want to introduce that the development of mediated systems that allowed messages to be kept and to be circulated and shared with millions of individuals changed the way that we thought about communication dramatically. I think I'm going to stop right there because I don't want to create a really long video that people will not want to listen to. But I think those things that I have covered so far will help you do well on your quiz. And it will also provide you something to think about when we're continuing this discussion in class. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to me via email, or you can also give me a call or shoot me a text message. My cell phone number is on the syllabus. I think that's all.